Hey, yo, what a dip, y'all. Let's get right into it. It's time for me to show y'all this idea that I started working on this weekend, right? It's a fun little goofy build. I've got a nice ice crystal chronomancer going on, which unfortunately was supposed to be something else, but I found out mid-leveling the character that that thing does not exist and the data was lying to me. But that's okay. That's okay because the idea turned out to be really strong in this form anyways. Kind of, sort of, admittedly, looks like it's based off of Garotha's Fireball Blood Mage. I promise I was not stealing from him. I was leveling on fire because the goal for this character was to be a cooldown abusing Chronomancer. That was the goal. I wanted to play Chronomancer to play around with the cooldown applications in this game through the supports such as Hourglass or Excise to add cooldowns to things, as well as just the existing cooldown skills in the game and utilize Chronomancer's ability to bypass / forcibly reset cooldowns on skills. That was the initial idea, and while leveling the build and playing around with stuff and getting to level 9 where I realized that I in fact did have access to Frostwall and I was trying it out mostly because I wanted the defensive aspect of Frostwall. Actually realized that Frostwall does a ton of damage, was reminded that I did in fact see Garotha's setup at some point. I was like, oh, that's actually really cool. But I have made some substantial adjustments to it because, well, his is a Blood Mage and mine is a Chronomancer, but also more importantly, I am more cold focused, where his build is more of a Fireball build that has ice crystals to help out with single target. All that said, let's actually talk about what this concept is, right? Because the original concept of an unleashed staff just doesn't exist. GGG, please put that in the game. Please, please, please. It was looking so cool. Anyways, what we're doing is using Frostwall to spawn a ton of ice crystals, right? Especially when linked to Spell Cascade. And when these crystals are broken, they shatter to do damage around them in an AoE that can be scaled up or down, right? This is a traditional case of AoE overlapping at its finest here. But it's very important to note, it has to be broken. It cannot expire from duration. It has to be broken by damage, your damage or enemy damage. It's also worth noting that sometimes these crystals literally just like implode on contact with enemy when they're forming because of, enemy models sometimes not being movable. Very convenient for like medium to large size bosses, by the way. Now, once we've, created all these crystals, we need to kill them. So we're also using Icicle support when you get to high enough level to be able to use it, as well as the Nut on the Tree Shattered Crystal to reduce the HP to make it easier on me to kill the crystal, so that they then poof and blow up all the enemies nearby, applying a ton of freeze in the process, by the way. It's beautiful. Then, as such, you just scale damage off of that idea. It's worth noting that I currently am using consider casting instead of conk effect because I could not find meaningful data in my testing that suggested that AoE would, but it was quick and dirty testing, mind you, that suggested that AoE actually impacted the number of crystals that I could hit. And I will be retesting this once I'm, just let's say like farming bosses or whatever with the character, whatever this ends up being, where I can actually like look at the things I'm hitting and make a more accurate guess as to how many hits I'm getting. Right now it's a little difficult to guess, so I went with the one that doesn't crush my AoE down because it does affect the amount, like the spread of the crystals and the AoE of the crystals, and as such the area that the skill covers. I will give you one consideration for conk effect though. Conk effect on Frostwall does mean the skill will be notably smaller than pretty much any skill you can use to break it, meaning that you will pretty much always hit all the crystals with the skill you want to use to break it. And that could be a meaningful factor that I have tested a little bit and I did like, but I want the clear from not running conk effect, right? So that's a personal choice thing. Now, all of that to say, we actually do need to break these crystals. So there are 3 methods that stood out to me, and then I did have a goofy one, right? I'll tell you right now, the goofy one is I use Comet to break it sometimes, but that's a backup plan that's specific to my setup, and it's just kind of goofy and funny and gets some really funny moments when I watch a health bar go, right? But the actual method, the one that I am using in this build primarily, is Frost Bomb. And this one, I do not think works on other Ascendancies very well. I think a lot of the value in being able to use Frost Bomb in this way does come from the fact that my Frost Bomb barely, I use Second Wind actually because of how much I'm able to rely on the re-triggers from my Ascendancy compared to like having to use, say, not Innervate, but Ingenuity support and hope that it comes up in between casts that I need. It just doesn't really work the same. Plus, being able to invest in Frostbomb this way also means I'm able to really lean on it for the extremely high amount of damage that Frostbomb actually does. Like the burst windows on bosses where I'm getting constant resets on my frost walls and frost bombs looks disgusting. It's beautiful. I love it. Now, when you do try out Frostbomb, I recommend trying out Ingenuity versus Second Wind and picking the support that fits you better. I'm a fan of Second Wind, but I can see an argument for Ingenuity, right? Number 2, and the one that you're going to use in leveling especially, is Fireball. Fireball is a really good way to break the skills. The crystals, right? You just throw a ton of projectiles out and nuke them all down. The projectiles scale with AoE so that you can make it easier to hit more of the crystals. It's a good setup. There's a reason why Garatha is using it. I promise you, Garatha, if you are not familiar with this content, look, Garatha is good at what he does. He loves to cook. He was definitely cooking with this one. And 3, the one I'm currently testing in the current version of my character, but I am not fully sold on yet, is Ice Nova, right? Because the thing with Frostbomb is sometimes it is down. And so I had to pick between Fireball and Ice Nova, and I want to use Ice Nova to make this character more of a full, complete cold character, as opposed to, you know, relying on scaling the Fireball damage. I would like if I could have my breaking skill scale alongside the rest of my damage skills. But Ice Nova does do considerably less damage than Fireball because of its improved like cast time. It's much faster than Fireball, which is Unleash comes back off cooldown, comes back up faster and stuff like that. But again, both of these buttons to me, Fireball or Ice Nova, are backup plans. The primary button here is Frostbomb. It's worth noting though, Ice Nova only particularly useful after you get to T3 supports. Do not try this skill without Astral Projection support. Please do not. But I'll talk about this later in a future update if I actually think that I can get the skill high enough in damage to actually one-shot the crystals, because that's what we really want. We want one cast to completely annihilate all my crystals. We'll talk more about how I leveled the character so you guys should see the progression, but it's worth noting that all of my skill gem details, both current and in leveling, are going to be found in the planner that's in the description. So feel free to check that out, right? Now, the bigger thing here, right? I talked about the actual skill. We have to talk about the Ascendancy that we're combining it with, right? That's the two parts of the build. Chronomancer. Why Chronomancer? Well, I told you I was going for something kind of wacky and goofy and it just didn't exist anymore, but that did not stop me from wanting to play Chronomancer anyways, because there was a number of things about the cooldown side of the Ascendancy that interested me, as well as just the investment into recoup or potentially even time freeze. Who knows? What I've settled on for this build in particular is that we are still going to, of course, take now and again first. The 33% chance to just straight up ignore the cooldown use is core to my damage rotation. And by rotation, I mean gambling, because sometimes you don't proc. And sometimes you kill a boss by only chaining frost bombs and frost walls on it and never actually have to press another button. So depending on RNG, mileage may vary, but this button has felt incredible and definitely enables a lot of what we're doing here. And otherwise, you could take what I take number 2, number 1, and you just be leveling for the most part as Garatha's Fireball Blood Mage, but like on a Chronomancer with a real defensive node. And that's Circular Breathing. These are the 2 Ascendancies that I took at, you know, Act 2 and Act 3, and these 2 are massive. Circular Breathing feels so good. The recoup amount is just large enough that you actually do benefit from it pretty substantially. And the bigger thing, more importantly, is that recoup actually feels really good in this game compared to PoE1, because you don't just instantly fall over and die, and it's not competing with other forms of just instant recovery. We'll talk about that more later when I like kind of muse for you guys regarding my defenses. Muse, by the way, I have it written down. It's not like I'm just thinking about it live, but it's like give you guys the musings because I want your feedback on how I put that together. Maybe some ideas to make it better, right? And the talk about recoup means that number 3 is obviously going to be the Rapid River, turning recoup into a 4-second period instead of an 8-second period to massively steroid it up. And then lastly, I think it's going to end up being Apex on the moment, sadly, because Unbound Encore doesn't really seem like it has any real payoffs yet, but I might think of something, right? And if I think of something, you'll know, right? Or if you think of something, let me know, right? I'm curious either way. That's the strength of the Ascendancy, right? The idea behind the Ascendancy is that it is the only Ascendancy in the game that really strictly supports cooldown skills. Ignore that Temporalis exists as an item. That item gives me depression, right? If we ignore Temporalis for a second, this Ascendancy is the way to support cooldown skills, and I wanted to play around with it, as well as the fact that I actually really like the enhanced investment into recoup as a method of recovery, and I want to play around with it. That's what we're doing with the Chronomancer on this character. Now, as far as leveling, not going to give you the full play-by-play, step-by-step on how to level. This will be in the planner, right? You will see the write-up that says, hey, these gems with these supports and whatnot at these times. I don't have a full like order for, you know, like exactly when you will get things. That's kind of for you to figure that part out. But the general idea is this. You're going to start out on Spark and Flame Wall. You're given Spark, and Flame Wall buffs it to an insane degree. It's just really strong. Don't fight it. Support your Spark with Arcane Tempo and Pierce, and your Flame Wall with Fortress, and kind of just go crazy. You can take Frost Bomb at this level, but it doesn't really do much of anything yet. You don't really want to invest supports into it yet, because you're going to be taking one of its supports off of it anyways once you get to level 3 gems, which you're going to then pick up Ember Fusillade to give that setup I just mentioned earlier some real single target, right? That's when you're going to start having actual single target. At this point, you can consider, by the way, once you have Fusillade, replacing Arcane Tempo with Unleash on your Spark. And that's because then you can charge up Fusillade and let go of an Unleash Spark while waiting for the Fusillade to go off. And that works on bosses and like for mobbing, and it felt really comfortable, right? Then at level 5 gems, I have a cook for you here, because I did this one, and it's actually most of the reason I'm even including a leveling section in the video instead of leaving it just to the guides, because I want you to hear about this minor cook, which is that Solar Orb is actually not a bad skill at all. Not every skill needs to absolutely nuke everything in front of you at all times, right? Some skills just need to be dedicated. Sometimes you just need a skill dedicated to the large amount of trash in an area, especially if you could funnel them through like a tighter area. Solar Orb is incredible for that. And you can use overabundance support to get a second Solar Orb, so that you can just Solar Orb, and like bake the shit out of one choke point. It feels really good. Alternatively, you can use a Power Fight Staff for Living Bomb and use overabundance on that. But I would still be considering using Solar Orb anyways, because the skill just felt that good. At level 7, you're going to pick up your Curse, which is worth noting at that point in the game, you are a fire build, so it's flammability, but you're going to want hypothermia as well. Luckily, we're going to be putting our curses on Blasphemy in this character, so we don't actually need to keep it low level as badly as other characters. But man, do I hate the mana cost on curses otherwise. So if you're going to self-cast your curse, get it at 7, please. At level 9 gems, you're going to get the like big thing, right? The Fireball Frostwall combo that really enables this setup in full, at which point you'll do the full transition into the Frostbomb Frostwall setup with Fireball for backup, Flame Wall to help out in case you need it. And I still kept Solar Orb because Solar Orb just does funny damage. Like, it actually is very useful for, again, like large situations, especially while I was figuring out the setup a little bit more like cleanly, I would say. And then if you're me, you take Comet at level 11 just because Comet, right? Also, some level 2 supports to be worth noting in case you, for some reason, do not read the planner that I put in there. I know you're going to read it, but like in case for some reason you didn't read it. Spell Echo on Frostbomb and Icicle on Frostwall are the only 2 level 2 supports that I really stalked for. Icicle on Frostwall first, because it makes it so much easier to kill your Frostwalls. And Spell Echo just because it actually works really favorably with Frostbomb. It literally is just 2 Frostbombs for 1 cast. It's beautiful. Love it. Doesn't interact with your cooldowns or anything. Love it. And then level 3 supports, Astral Projection is for how you play with Ice Nova if you want to try it. But again, that's a try it thing. I am not guaranteeing that you will like it. Your mileage will vary. But again, all of these details and some more details in the planner, so you can actually like have a good old plan for leveling your character. Now, let me cook with y'all a little bit, right? Talk about defense, because my experience with leveling a sword, especially after having just played a monk, right, is that the defenses feel extremely different, primarily in two places, right? One, monk comes with a lot of avoidance, right? You just naturally lean yourself towards evasion or evasion ES gearing, which puts you on the track to just straight up avoid damage at a much higher rate. You'll still die to one-shots, but you avoid a lot of like the trash damage on the way to those one-shots, and that's very noteworthy. I wanted to take that into consideration. I'm thinking about how to gear up this chrono, because we don't have that natural avoidance really in the tree area, as I'm primarily looking at shield nodes and mana nodes right now and stuff like that. So my plan for getting some avoidance is probably just going to be go one-handed and shield instead of a staff long-term, so that I can get the passive block now that since they, because block has been going crazy ever since they fixed block to not need to be directional when you're not actually actively blocking. And I love that, which means we should play around with it. And 2 is that we need to do something with all this energy shit. We need to find a way to work with it. And this is where that thought about recoup is going to come in. So recoup, really strong in PoE too. Because we can get, as a Chronomancer with the Rapid River, PoE 1's recoup, right? The Rapid River sets it to 4 seconds, which is the duration of recoup in PoE 1. And there's actually a node on the tree that accelerates it to 3.2 seconds. So we can get a really nice and fast recoup window through playing a Chronomancer. PoE 1's recoup was kind of overlooked as a mechanic because the game could kill you so quickly, and also more importantly, there were so many other really strong instant methods to recover your HP on a character that you were like, well, why would I rely on the damage that I got hit by when I could just do it myself? No longer really the case here though, right? So we want to invest into this recoup, especially because that's what my Ascendancy gives me to work on in terms of defenses. And now we need to, how do we do that? I want to borrow a concept from how we make Inquisitors tanky in PoE 1. PoE 1, we made Inquisitors, quote, tankier, right, by giving them the ability to utilize their recovery more efficiently. Pious Path is an Ascendancy notable within the Inquisitor Ascendancy that gave them their life regen on their ES as well, assuming that they had the effect of Consecrated Ground on them. Consecrated Ground, funnily enough, gives them 5% life regen. So as long as they had Conk Ground, they were 5% life regen and 5% ES regen. But you've played enough PoE at this point probably to know that you take damage to your shield first and then your life. Now, if I'm taking damage on my shield, then my life, then I'm not really getting double value out of my regen until I've taken all of my shield down first. Then, while I'm getting hit on life, I'm also regenning shield. But that's not good enough. And so in PoE 1, we ended up adding in Divine Flesh, or Corrupted Soul, which gives you a ton of ES, but the more important thing is that it made 50% of all damage you take bypass the ES. Now when you're taking damage on your ES, it's 50-50 life and ES, which is perfect for an Inquisitor who has naturally balanced life and energy regen. You take 500 damage, it's 250 and 250, and you are regenning on both parts of that at the same time. You've effectively, quote, doubled your regen. This is what I want to take advantage of when we talk about recoup in PoE 2, because I can get recoup for life and mana, it seems, and there's a little bit of it on ES through like a node such as Glazed Flesh, but and then I can try to shift the damage around a little bit, right? We can use effects like Lucidity and other small passes on the tree to move damage from life to mana. There's the unique Azerius Disdain, which among other effects includes a portion of the damage you take bypassing your energy shield. So we can take damage on our shield, have a portion of that go to our life, and then point some of that damage over to our mana. Have all 3 of our pools going at once, which, funnily enough, recoup does not care how the damage you take is distributed. Recoup says damage you take is recouped as, not damage you take on life is recouped as life, and damage you take on mana is recouped on mana. No, damage you take is recouped on mana. So if I take 300 damage, right? Let's just use a fake number here for a second. We take 300 damage and I'm recouping, let's just say 30% life, 20% ES, 20% mana. I don't know how many 20% ES, but cope with the example for a second. This is mostly for the point of like making a point here, right? Then when I take the 300 damage, it gets split up across those 3 sources in terms of what I'm taking damage on, but then I'm still recouping. No matter how much life damage I took, I'm recouping 90 over the next 3.2 seconds, right? I'm recouping 60 ES and 60 shield over the next 2 seconds as well. And so with a proper distribution of damage taken, I can really stretch the value of my recoup. And then at that point, it's just a matter of expanding my pool large enough, because recoup gets stronger the larger your ability to take hits is. And then again, using the shield's avoidance to reduce the damage that we actually take. I think it's actually a really cool idea. I'm looking forward to gearing that up and putting it together. I will let you guys know in the future if it actually turns out all right, right? That's the goal anyway. Or you can check it out live on Twitch and you can roast me fail at making it happen, because I'm I'm going to end up missing something, or, not knowing about a unique, or a unique's not going to work or something like that, right? Anyways, now that I've talked about all of that, I want to go ahead and get in game and show you guys a little bit of what I've got going on in terms of a tree. That'll also end up being in the planner anyways, but I just want to show you guys kind of like how the character plays with more detail to it than what you might have been seeing in the showcase footage, right? let's go over there. Alrighty, quick in-game moment to show you guys some things, right? One, tree looks a little bit like what you'll see on the guide. It might look a little different as well because I'm still between making the guide and playing the character. I definitely have some different thoughts after testing a variety of nodes and being tired of spending all my gold because I'm just like flooring gold into the ground testing things out. But this is roughly the tree. Path up, grab good damage nodes. Play around freeze buildup is pretty important, and climate change ends up feeling really good. Shattered Crystal, as I mentioned, very important. Figuring out how many defensive nodes I actually need and don't need. Stuff like that. How much mana I actually need. This Arcane Surge node feels really good. Lots of AoE investment. We're going to talk about this AoE investment in a second here, but otherwise just good generically useful defensive nodes. You can see we're taking some of the recoup and we're starting to work on the engine for the build. Now, let me quickly showcase the build, like the way that we actually do play here, which you'll see 1, 2. I click to lay down the frost bomb. I put a frost wall on top of it. It explodes. Actually, almost everything. That one's not there, by the way. There's a weird visual bug that you need to be aware of, where sometimes your crystal will still be there, but it's not actually interactable, which is very noticeably testable when you try to like frost nova one. Which, by the way, this is ice nova. Actually looks really cool with unleash and projection. However, as you'll see here, currently does not do enough damage to kill all these, and that's something that I need to be like wary of. So like, look at that. Like these things are actually alive still. And that's one of the things that I'm working on if I actually like or not. That's why I said I'm going to test before I tell you guys to do it, right? Like I would recommend either fireball there or just nothing, but I'm stubborn and I want to make this work. So I'm going to make this work. Now, to show you another difference in things, right? Let's talk about with versus without conk effect on my frost wall. So conk effect on the frost wall now, look how much small, like you can see how small the area actually is relative to this frost bomb, which is massive compared to it. And then it bugs out because it's PoE. But frost bomb, frost wall. Look how tiny the frost wall area is, but it spreads out a little weirdly, and that's why I'm not really sure. Like the behavior is not super consistent, right? Is there something for you to be like aware of as you start to like try play? If you intend on playing this character and you aren't just watching this to see how I cooked it up or anything, right? You also notice here I'm playing around with like hourglass on comet and stuff for really funny moments where like I freeze a boss and then I don't actually have any frost bombs up, so I layer them with stuff and then I just nuke them this way, create like a giant area of damage. It's a kind of a funny concept, not the most effective thing in the world, but it's funny, right? Just little stuff like that. Then you can also see I use blasphemy on my temp chain so I can like take slowing enemies is really strong, and then grim feast to recover HP and ES when we're killing stuff. Little stuff like that, but again, that's all in the game. Anywho, I just wanted to hop in game really quickly to show you guys how this like actually like functions. If you want to see the fireball stuff, you know, you could find Garotha's video. I have a feeling you might know the name or a little bit or something, right? Anywho, thank you guys for watching. If you want to see this live, that link is in the description. Or you know, otherwise, feel free to give me some cooks in the comments to work on for this build. And stay tuned for updates at some point about how this character hopefully did not fail. Take care, you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.